So, Anna, can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey, who you are, and what led you to where you are now?
Yep. So my name's Anna Jones, and I am CEO and co-founder at RefuAid and Merit. And so RefuAid was founded in 2016 with myself and my co-founder Tamzin. And we initially were just people in our local community who had felt we wanted to do something to help. At that time, we were seeing a lot of images coming out of the Greek islands, particularly Lesbos, where there was a number of boats arriving of people seeking sanctuary. And we were collecting food and donations. And then we actually decided, after speaking to a lady who was out on the islands, to put together a medical trip. So, volunteer doctors and nurses and a load of medication, and go out to Greece in Lesbos in order to see, well, to drop the meds off and then see if the volunteer doctors and nurses could do anything to help. And so that trip changed pretty much everyone's life that went on it. I think it arrived before there was any sort of NGOs there, and the government had really mobilized to do anything to support people. And so what that meant was it was really horrific what we arrived to. A number of boats were capsizing every day. There were, thousands of people arriving, fleeing Syria and also Iraq, Afghanistan. And so we kind of had this medical aid that we ended up giving to the local hospitals, and then the doctors and nurses were volunteering to treat people on arrival. But what happened was we built up a relationship with those people arriving, particularly those that spoke some English, and were hearing their stories and also what they were looking for. And resoundingly, it was for somewhere safe and private to live, to be able to get their kids into school and to be able to support their families. And yet, kind of when we saw the response mobilize, it was to put people in camps, take away their independence, kind of force people into this dependency model. And I think we were a bit naive. We were like, oh, the UK will have a much better support system in place, and we can recognize that people arriving want to contribute and be part of the community until, and have their kids here and raise their families here, and resoundingly mostly want to go home when they can as well, but want to be able to live safely until that point. And so we started an organization in the UK. Firstly, we focused on English language because we knew people who'd arrived in the UK that we'd met either in Greece or in Calais, who needed to learn the language in order to go to university and in order to return to work. And so we built a language program that worked across the country in partnership with private English language schools to get people to qualification stage. Half the people we supported on that program were students, and then the other half were people returning to their careers. And so the students went off to uni and accessed student finance. And those who were returning to their careers, the next stage for them was re-accrediting. So anyone who's qualified in a career overseas needs to sit exams and licenses in the UK in order to say, yes, your qualification from Syria in medicine is equivalent to the same here. And that's really expensive. So we found it was costing around £6,000 up to £16,000 for professions like pharmacy and law. So we started lending money to
Okay.
cover that cost, and we've now lent just under £3 million, and the repayment rate's about 98.6%. It's kind of stayed that same stage. And then recently, in the last couple of years, we've really been embracing tech. So we passed our language program over to another charity, and we've been focusing on the lending and the re-accreditation, but also embracing the technology that's out there. So we've built our own AI tool that is Path. We can talk a bit more about that, but then we're also looking at how our lending approach can be scaled using AI to really enable people. So the first tool we bought, I think we found that, one of the major barriers for people was access to information. And so we found a lot of people who had refugee status in the UK and were reaccrediting into a career they'd had in their home country. They were inundated with inaccurate information, or one of the major problems, for example, was with universities. People would apply to do a master's degree in education, and what they were looking for was to return to work as a teacher, which you actually need to do a PGCE for. But the universities may not have been aware that that was what their focus was. And so they accept people onto a master's degree, and then people do a master's degree there in 20 grand's worth of debt, and then they realize they need to do a different qualification. So Path is an AI tool that you can find at path.refuaid.org, and you enter in kind of data on your background, on your career, on your qualifications. and it will build you a tailored pathway that sets out the steps that you need to take in order to re-accredit and get back to the same level. And then it has Rafi, which is a chatbot essentially, which is built off an existing large scale LLM, then with our own data on top. And that is also if you have any additional questions. So if you're missing a document, for example, or if you failed an exam, you can kind of talk with Rafi about what you need and how you can progress.
Wow. That is amazing. That's such an amazing origin for RefuAid, even up to Merit AI now. It's kind of incredible that you saw these people coming in and you saw what needed to be done. And I also think it's incredible at the rate that people are actually returning this money. 98% in 9 years is brilliant as well. It's showing that, people don't want to be dependent on the state. They don't want to be dependent or asking for handouts.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question about your sort of mobilizing yourself in the first place and going off to Lesbos? And is that something you've done before? Were you just really pulled to do it? Or, yeah, I'd love to just understand a little, because people see things and hear things all the time. We watch the news, there's terrible things happening around the world every single day. And yeah, how did what made you mobilize yourself at this time and really make that happen? And yeah, I'd love to.
I think it's a testament to how, social media and other big tech can be used for good. Because I think I was sort of, as I think a lot of people are now, consuming a lot of media that was making me feel sad and frustrated. And like I wasn't seeing kind of my own values sort of replicated in what was coming out of maybe government or mainstream media. Joining a local kind of refugee welcome group or whatever, it just meant there was a forum of other people, I suppose, feeling the same. And so it felt like a safe space to start that conversation. And then I think for me, it was the day that Aylan Kurdi, the little boy in Turkey, his image was on the front page of all the papers. And I remember I was working in a law firm at the time. And I walked into the firm. We used to have like every newspaper on the front desk of that day. And it was obviously on the front page of every paper. And people were just walking past, sort of, having their normal conversations. And for me, it was just a moment to say no. And for Tamsin and myself, that was how we connected, because she just wrote a post on Facebook saying, I need to do more. And then I commented saying, I'm feeling the same. And then Luke, who was a surgeon who came with us, was like, should we just go for a coffee? And so I think it's a testimony to like embracing your local community who are, where those frustrations are shared, and then also using the technology that's out there. Because what we did after we physically met for a coffee was use social media to talk to somebody who was on the ground and say, what do you need? And she responded to say, we need doctors and nurses. And so that was really the instigator. It wasn't necessarily any individual person, but just all of us coming together.
Wow, that's incredible. I feel like we've heard a lot of stories lately about the power of community. There's been so much about the power of community, especially with AI coming about as well. It's like, how can we as people group together to use this for good?
Yeah.
And I felt like you've really cracked it, which is what this podcast is about as well.
I just love to understand a little bit more, because you just said you were working in law at the time. Now you're designing AI. So I'm just curious a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah. So I was doing some work in the legal sector in a view to my background, my degree was in international relations, and I focused on Sudan. So I guess there was that academic understanding of the conflict there. And then I wanted to do immigration law, because what I felt like was everyone I met, there's a lot of practical barriers, and we see it still, worse probably now. And I felt like everyone I met needed a good lawyer. And so in order to really help people, I wanted to go into immigration law. But obviously after going to Greece and then starting RefuAid, I thought maybe that would happen again one day, but here we are as time's gone on. And I still think law is so important. But I think with AI and with tech and with our change of focus recently, what I found is it's so important that while we're building these tools and these tools are being created, they're being built fairly and with kind of, 100% understanding of those who, what humanity is and what it consists of and what people need, but also that we're building them with access in mind. And I think that's become something that, particularly over the last couple of months, is becoming even more clear to me. And Path, for example, is a tool that we've built that really, yes, it's specific, but it does no more now than if you were paying the maximum subscription to one of the top LLMs. But most people we work with can't afford to pay that maximum subscription. So if only the role is now, and I think it probably is better in terms of how tailored it is and with linguistic stuff. But if the only thing we're doing at scale is providing access, then that's also okay with us, because I think it's getting lost a lot in the conversation. So in terms of my career, it's changed, but I guess I was looking at access to legal support, and now I'm looking at access to information in a different way.
Okay, great to hear that journey, and how driven by your passion, really. And I think that's what we all want, to be on purpose in the work we're doing. So it sounds like you really are. You've talked about different needs of refugees, from language skills to actually re-accrediting, because the UK needs you to prove that you're as qualified as you are, or up to UK standards. How has that impacted? You've talked about providing access to Path, which it's a little bit like, an LLM by the sound of it. But not just access, is it? Is there something about personalisation that's important in the tools that you design? I'm just wondering how the understanding of those stories, the people that you're really trying to serve through your AI, has impacted how you designed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's context. So both with Path and with Merit, which isn't public yet, but it's exactly the same. It's about people being able to put their context into these machines in order to get the best support out of them, and also the machines being able to understand that context and respond like in the best way. And I think it's really important to us. So, and with Path, which I guess is it's information and response dependent on whatever context people are in. But then with Merit, it's about finance dependent on their context. So I think what we've realized is that the systems and structures that we have in place now all operate on very sort of traditional data metrics that don't serve a lot of communities who've either marginalized or new to a community, or for whatever reason might not fit into this more traditional kind of data metric system. So, if you've got a degree from a UK university, it's recognized by employers. It's something that kind of plugs in. If you've got 5 years credit history in the UK and a fixed address for the last 3 years, again, it plugs into those existing points. But what we've recognized with AI is that we can use alternative data metrics that people do have. They may be different and slightly out of those traditional metric contexts, but they tell the same stories that we need to know in order to be able to give access to information or finance or whatever it may be. Yeah, so that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. What metrics are there? Am I allowed to ask? Or yeah.
So when it comes to Path, obviously there's some ones, for example, what your degree is in, what country, what university it was from, when you got your degree or qualification. And then people can add in sort of where they want to go to, and then it builds it suspended. But then with Merit, which is really interesting, is that we look at kind of the traditional financial metrics that people may have. So even if it's just a few months of banking, but then also what we're looking at now is their future earning potential. So having lent for re-accreditation for 9 years, we know that just because somebody isn't in employment today doesn't mean that they're not kind of credit worthy. We can look at, okay, so you're not in employment right now, but do you have any qualifications? And if you don't, are you looking at getting some? And if you do, are you looking at returning to that level of employment? And it's really about building up a financial picture based on that person's context, and then kind of building a response. Yes, different.
I love this, and I'll tell you why, because there's a lot of research about women's progress in the workplace. They say that women are promoted on track record, men on potential.
Wow.
And what you're saying is these people don't have a track record, and what you're doing is leveling the playing field by understanding their potential. It's the ultimate leveler, because actually lots of people, even though it might not be obvious, they are given some sort of privilege because of their potential. So I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I think just going back, for me, I'm still focused on these repayment rates. They are actually amazing, especially for an interest-free model. I was wondering what you learned from RefuAid and your time before that as well, studying and working in law, all of those things that have helped you, I guess, assess potential opportunity, and especially with how you built the system as well? Like, what made you think to assess for potential rather than track
Mhm.
record? I guess it is obvious because they don't have any, but I mean, this is such a trailblazing business, company idea, all of it. It's not something that you see often.
Yeah, so I think for me it was what we experienced in Greece, and I think ironically, it's actually not to do with data that we've built these things. It's because of the perception that people have of others and and the difference between that and the reality. So I think when we went out to Greece, like we really didn't have any idea of what to expect. I don't think the media was showing accurately what was going on at the time. I think there was a lot of misconceptions, preconceptions about, you know, who was arriving as there are now. And so when we were there, one thing that was just abundantly clear was that pretty much no one was reporting on the situation accurately. And just as a person, we were meeting people who were so incredibly resilient and inspiring. And yet, so many presumptions were made about them, whether it was kind of in the media or from government support, or even the international NGOs themselves, who would kind of assume this dependency and that people kind of didn't have agency or abilities to build their own lives with the right resources. And I think one thing that was abundantly clear was that people really just needed some practical solutions as well. And so it was that shared humanity of just like meeting other people as people and understanding that the systems that be don't work in this context. And I think when you see them fail, when you see these systems that we've trusted in for so long and that serve us, you know, if we've grown up with them and a relative level of privilege to have benefited from being within those systems and having the right data, for example. And then you think, well, this doesn't really make sense because everything we saw in Greece spun all of that on its head. We've just built in order to respond to that. I think we've kind of always, everything we've built, we've always thought about if you were forced to flee and you were in that situation, what are the structural things you would need to change in order to just be able to live? Yeah.
And that amazing as well. Like, you've honestly answered all our questions so far so thoroughly. And I think that, you know, just flipping through the news as well, you can see this mismatch of what people think like a refugee is versus what they are. They're a human being with lived experience. And I think you're really working into that as well. Like, the fact that these people are people, they're not people that want handouts. They want to work, they want to live, they want to return to, I guess, normality. They
all the
want to.
same things that everyone else wants, ultimately.
Exactly.
Actually, there was something I only heard it briefly on the TV this morning as I was getting dressed about reform, talking about small boats and what they're going to do when if they got into power, and it is that sort of dehumanizing that we hear. And what I really loved about what you said was actually the human has come first in this, and you've used AI to help the human, not said the data says no, so that it's like, how can we use the data to be able to say yes? And I think more people need to know that AI can do that, because I think what it thinks is the former. AI is going to say no, and there's going to be no human interaction or thought or context in this. But it's like, how can we use it to do the things that perhaps we haven't been able to do, that the traditional banks would say no to?
And I think it's across the board. Like when we look at our hiring, because so we handed over our language and our employability work to Breaking Barriers and other organizations so that we could focus on lending. But I've been really involved in some of the employability work over the last few years. And this is where I have a frustration with charities not embracing AI, because I totally agree. I think I understand why there are concerns. And one of the things that we've built with Path is it doesn't retain any data. So there's no way it could get hacked and anyone's personal data gone. And it is challenging in this sector when you're dealing with really, really vulnerable people's data to build them. But it is also possible. And I think we've seen so many times how bias, how preconceptions, how, you know, people whether it's deliberate or not, people's own biases that they bring into hiring and the damage that that has, even with something as simple as people having gaps on their CVs or, qualifications from a country that's not their own. And AI can change all of that. It can massively, massively level the playing field in that respect. And it would be great to see more kind of nonprofits embracing it and more people working in the kind of inclusion space embracing it as well.
I completely agree. I was working in the charity sector for a bit last year, and AI seemed to be a bit of a taboo, as if it couldn't help us. AI is never going to be the silver bullet that kills the human race, because if in order to kill the human race, a human would have to want to do that. We're working towards generalized artificial intelligence, but it's just working off what we know. AI lacks empathy and warmth and humor. All of these things come from us and come from within, and it really can be used for so much good. And you've really done that. Yeah.
I think you wanted to talk about partnerships with employers.
Yeah, I did as well. I was seeing that you've merged some of your programs with Breaking Barriers, and that RefuAid is focused more on lending. But like your work with Breaking Barriers and your work with Kia, there are way more placements and genuine cultural change. I was wondering how you see AI helping organizations move beyond unconscious barriers.
Yeah. So I hope that it will, in terms of all elements of recruitment, I guess, really help people who, for whatever reason, whether it's they've had, and not just refugees, this could be for any women coming back to the workplace after having time out, or anyone who suffers with kind of the current systems, computer says no approach to recruitment. I hope this is where AI is going to step in. So, for example, one of the things that we massively struggled with, and we've worked with like huge global companies to smaller, medium businesses, and consistently this has come up as an issue, is everybody says, we want to do all this diversity and inclusion work with you. We'd love to run some employability days and CV workshops. And so usually what would happen is they would go really well because our candidates are so inspiring and driven to rebuild their lives and get back into the workplace. We would really tailor them to sectors. So we would have the students studying engineering or re-accrediting engineers with an engineering firm. And then after the employability day, quite often people would say, oh, you should keep an eye on our vacancies page and apply when something comes up. And then time and time again, our clients would apply and get nowhere. And it tended to be that they would have been out of work for maybe 2-3 years. And so the systems, the HR recruitment systems, no people, but the actual computer systems that have been set up by those companies would automatically kick their CVs out. And so, there's times we got around it by emailing the CV or picking up the phone. But it was such a long way of doing things. And you think AI, if AI is doing it right, it's going to look at those CVs. And if we're building it right, it might ask more questions. If we build this contextual piece into it, it might go back to the applicant and say, hey, we've noticed that there's a 2-year gap on your CV. Could you give us a bit more information? And any recruiter, and I had this with a law firm, who understands the agency that it's taken, the resilience it's taken to leave your home, travel across the world, rebuild your life, find safety, is going to recognize that as a skill that you're bringing to the workplace. And I think that's where AI could really, really make a difference in terms of recruiting and hiring, is that maybe that contextual piece, but also just not automatically kicking CVs out because they've got a gap or the qualification doesn't align with what they know.
I think, you're speaking to equity. It's at the heart
Yeah.
of all of my work. Yeah, that understanding we're not all starting from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, once you get someone in, how much are they going to value that opportunity? They're not going to take it for granted. They're going to work their socks off. They're going to be committed. And actually, most of the time, they're probably going to be overqualified as well. So it's such a find. But you can overlook that by thinking we need the same sort of people who I recognize where they were educated. We're going to have the same conversations, but actually you're not going to bring that difference into your workplace. So it's great that you're able to find some organizations who are really getting it. And it's a wonderful mission, really aligned with the work I do. But I also understand the challenges. We know that you've recently been recognized for awards for social impact, but you're also investing heavily in technology. And I think that people can think there's a dichotomy. They can think it's like you're either social or you're a tech, because when they think about tech, they're thinking about the big billionaires, the big global organizations, who are kind of laying people off at the moment, actually. So, how do you balance that? How can you stay true to your mission, your community focus, while embracing AI as a tool for systemic change? I think, I really am curious about the answer, because I think a lot of people are struggling with this and are challenged by this at the moment.
Absolutely. So we balance that by the fact that everyone. So the way that we assess people for credit is currently we're testing merit, but then we also, part of that contextual piece is a video interview with applicants, and it can be brief and sometimes they cannot be brief, but everyone in our team still does that. And we kind of, when we're making big decisions, and we've done this today even, we soundboard those decisions with the people that we've lent to. And so we are really, really involved with the community of people. And that's, I mean, our team is very small now, but that is across our entire team. That is never going to change. We are never going to, no matter what happens, remove ourselves from the need, because I've seen time and time and again, and this isn't necessarily just a tech thing, but as soon as organizations grow, particularly in the impact space, and you lose touch with your why, then decisions start to get convoluted and made for the wrong thing. So I think it's about that. And then it's also recognition that AI is just another tool in our toolbox. And I was reading today Mustafa Suleyman's latest essay, but it's so important that we all remember this. It's really, really important that people working in the impact space are building them and are having a voice, because like we're saying, we were just mentioning about the gaps on CVs and that people may have transferable skills because they've rebuilt their lives. I don't think those opinions are necessarily reflected in San Francisco. And so I think it's really, really, really important that affected communities and the organizations working with them are having those reasoning and that data and those algorithms built into these models. But whatever we build, it's a tool, and it's only there to help us achieve our mission. Our mission hasn't changed. Our mission has stayed about, providing people with the means to live an independent and dignified life in safety. And it is amazing that we can build these things that help us do it quicker and support more people, but they are still a tool. We are not AI, and AI is not us. It's what we're using to kind of help more people.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
amazing. So we're on to our quick fire round now. In one word, what fuels your resilience as a social change maker?
Clients.
Nice. What's the simplest thing more employers could do to welcome refugee talent?
Hire people into roles commensurate with their skills and experience.
Nice. And what is your favorite way to unwind after a long strategy session?
Very trashy reality TV.
Thank you so much for this episode. It's been amazing. It's been amazing to speak to you and hear about all the work that you've done and that you're still doing.
Been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Shame we couldn't have you on camera, but it was better to hear what you were saying clearly, because it's so important.
Yeah.
And we really hope that those people listening will really take action, really consider refugee talent, and really consider using AI for good, for social impact. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be with you. Thank you. Bye.